Have you ever been to a country where the husband selling his wife for $1 million?
New husband. What about the criteria?
Kind.
This is the dark side of Russia. We all know Russia as one of the world's superpower countries, but the territory has a long history. The vast nation stretches over from Eastern Europe and Northern Asia. The country is so big, it has over 11 time zones with different landscapes. In the early 1600s, the Romanov dynasty took over the rule for over 3 centuries. The Romanov dynasty was ended by Lenin in the early 1900s, just before the First World War ended. Lenin's army established the Soviet Union, and Lenin ruled until his death in 1924. After Lenin, Stalin took over and Russia was involved in World War II, joining the Allied forces. After World War II, however, Russia was in a Cold War against another superpower country, the USA. This was until Mikhail Gorbachev was elected as General Secretary in 1985, who effectively restructured Russian political and economic constructs. He ended the Cold War in 1990 and was elected as president the same year. In 1991, there was an unsuccessful Communist Party coup which resulted in the resignation of Gorbachev and the dissolution of the Soviet Union. Boris Yeltsin was elected as the next president, and Russia, along with Belarus and Ukraine, formed the Commonwealth of Independent States. Yeltsin resigned in 1999 and named Vladimir Putin as the next acting president. There's a reason why Russia is called one of the world's superpower nations. Russia's GDP grows at an average stable rate of 1.12% every year from 2012 to 2022. They have the 5th largest economy in the world, with a GDP of $3,995 trillion for the year 2022. They also have a GDP per capita of $10,078.90 in 2022. Unfortunately, it seems that this growth in GDP is not properly distributed to the public. In the Corruption Perceptions Index, Russia scored 72 out of 100. Sadly, a higher score means more corruption. Russia has a very high level of corruption. It's ranked as the 139th country in the world for transparency. Corruption has been a long-standing tradition in Russia, starting from the time of czars, communists, and modern times. For example, during Stalin's time in 1948, 7 members of the Soviet Union Supreme Court were suspended for taking bribes. This continued well into the 1990s and 2000s. In the year 2000, it was estimated that state corruption cost the citizens almost $3 billion. In 2001, a similar survey was conducted with business people, and it was even worse. Business corruption cost the citizens up to $33.8 billion. Then, a new type of corruption erupted by the 2000s, oligarchy by having the government and business merge. By 2011, 94% of public officials had ownerships in large companies. This way, they could use their influence to lobby their interest in the government and take over the market. Ironically, one famous case is of the corruption of the acting head of the department within the police force's anti-corruption division. They found so much money in cash, 87 million GBP, at his house that the investigation had to stop and find a container big enough to hold the entire stash. Corruption in Russia is what led to the income and wealth inequalities in Russia. It is said that the richest 1% in Russia hold 50% of the national income and wealth. This leaves the other 99%, only 50% of the wealth left over in the country. Approximately 8% of the population still lives below the poverty line in Russia in 2022. This is an improvement of 13% in 2025, but the country still has a lot to improve. Another form of power imbalance in Russia is the presence of the Russian Mafia. You might already be familiar with the Russian Mafia, or the Vori, as it's ubiquitous through pop culture. It turns out they already exist ever since the Tsarist years. They were reshaped in Stalin's Gulag or the communist prison, but after the Soviet was dissolved, they blended in with the new elite. They're now a new breed of gangster, businessmen, or the Avtoritet. As the Iron Curtain fell, the Vori also extended to other countries. They peddle all types of criminal services from money laundering to computer hacking. These gangsters have a stronghold of the country because often they're working with the government. This is also why it's hard to bring them down. One such case is of a key witness in the Russian Mafia bribe case in 2015, a businessman called Badri Shengelia who testified in court that the head of Moscow's investigative committee received a $500,000 bribe from a notorious mob boss. Maximenko received a 13-year sentence thanks to Shengelia's testimony. But sadly, Shengelia was found shot dead in a Mercedes in St. Petersburg in 2018. Another figure that's familiar in Russia is Peter Listerman. Listerman is a Russian man who hires Russian and Ukrainian models for his VIP escort agencies. According to the Daily Beast investigation, he has strong connections with the notorious Jeffrey Epstein. Listerman's clients include Hollywood's rich and famous, and his job is to match them with young, unassuming women. He was even dubbed as the world's famous seller of young models to oligarchs. Listerman would approach modeling schools and beauty pageants to search for young, fresh girls for his clients. He even mentioned in an interview that he sold his wife for $1 million. Listerman had a wife named Ira Panteeva. He was approached by a photographer from New York who was infatuated by Ira Panteeva and asked Listerman to give her to him. Listerman said, "Throw me $1 million." So the photographer gave him $1 million and took his wife. Listerman said that he can sometimes give wives to oligarchs for free, in exchange for food and accommodation, whenever and wherever he wants. He claimed that he approached someone from the Capital Group and offered to get Naomi Campbell for an apartment. No words on whether or not he got Naomi Campbell, but he did get the apartment. Every country has their dark and bright sides, but I have a couple more interesting things about Russia that may surprise you. The Russian Interior Ministry is on a mission to crack down on uniform modification, after male officers started cutting off their sleeves and female officers started shortening their skirts. Some confusing images even surfaced that the female officers were wearing very short uniform skirts with heels. This can be very distracting to the public and officers themselves. The ministry wants all officers to have a tidy and neat appearance. Thus, not only the officers are banned from wearing non-standard uniforms, they cannot have wrinkles as well. Another interesting fact that you might want to know more about Russia is Russia's Vladimir Lenin. He is embalmed and available to visit for the public at his own mausoleum in Russia. The man died 99 years ago, but upon seeing his body, you might think he's just taking a nap. The body was not previously meant to be on show for such a long time, but as droves of people kept coming from all over the country, they finally decided to preserve the body. There's even a whole team of scientists whose job is keeping Lenin's body intact called the Lenin Lab. Previously, when it started, it had over 200 members, but now the number is much smaller. Have you ever felt anxious over life? Then maybe you can follow the Russian farmers' lead and use VR to relieve anxiety. But the farmers aren't the ones using VR headsets. Their cows are. Believe it or not, these cows wear VR systems and are shown in a unique summer field simulation program. They've shown to give good moods across the board and even increase the milk production. They're hoping to expand the study to see if there's any more positive effects. Who knows? This might be a new industry standard in the near future. Although Russia has its own downsides, there's so much more to this mysterious country.